Wonderful. Thank you very much, everyone, for being here. And thank you, Valentine, for allowing us that few minutes of reconnection with ourselves. It was very welcome. So the theme of today's session is emotional resilience as a silent yet very effective tool for climate action. So before I start and to level set on this session, I'm just going to ask our speakers to very briefly introduce themselves. And as you introduce yourself, if you can give me your definition of what does emotional resilience amounts to for you. So Yushendu, maybe I'll start with you.
Thank you so much, Sophie. Hi again, everyone. My name is Jennifer Ochendu. I'm the founder of a youth organization called Susty Vibes, based off in Nigeria. I'm also on the Global Steering Committee for a network called COP27. And these two organizations that I represent are very passionate about the intersection of climate change and mental health, thinking about it as a new way to rethink adaptation, especially for the global south and even the global north, thinking about ways that we can support people, psychological resilience, and also looking deep within ourselves. As you know, as the topic mentions, a silent solution to rethink climate action. How do we go back to our minds, to our psychic, and to what really drives us, our emotions? And for us at Susty Vibes, we started to see this come up in 2019, working with young people who started to say they were scared, they were frightened, they were feeling that sense of hopelessness about the work that we did, even as activists, even as young people. We plant a tree one day, in terms of planting trees and supporting climate action. But tomorrow you feel really depressed, you feel really anxious, and you feel like there's no hope. So that's that idea, the idea that we need to go back to psychological resilience, support people, especially young people, especially the most vulnerable, and help them think about hope. And I think that's everything we're going to speak about today, that idea of transformation and hope. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Elise, say a few words about yourself and how would you define emotional resilience?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for the invitation and thank you for the kind meditation we had at the very start. I think this is actually one of the keys of emotional resilience, mindfulness, meditation, yoga, and making sure we are aligned, our mind, our soul, and our body. So when I think about emotional resilience, in particular coping with climate change, there are two things in particular we are looking at with climate sustainability. We have a mentoring program, so we are supporting youth leaders in this journey. And one thing is to support in terms of dealing with eco-anxiety. I think we all feel that the world is going to change so rapidly, so there are things that we'll have to let go. There will be a lot of grief. But then how is it that we navigate our emotions to unlock the power of collective action? So how do we also use our networks, our families, our friends, our communities to try to drive positive action? And that's really what keeps us human. And this emotional resilience is also about navigating our own emotions as individuals. I don't know about you, but I'm quite a sensitive person, so it's how you navigate, the ups and downs. So how you surf the waves of emotions through your life. And there are also a few elements which are very basic. How you make sure you have enough sleep, you have good food, and nurturing the love also with your family and your friends. So I think that's an important one.
Thank you, Elise. Now, what's interesting about this conversation today, I think, is really how we starting to embed the concept of emotional resilience as a prerequisite to solutions. And why is that? Because when you think about adaptation, adaptation really relies on people's ability to contribute to that adaptation. And the interesting, I think, point in this COP square, which Jennifer will ask you to say a few more words about, is really to make the case for emotional resilience to be an essential part of population's ability to adapt and something that needs to be invested in. can you maybe expand a little bit on that, Jennifer, and with that explain COP Square as an initiative?
Thank you. Thank you, Sophie. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Thank you, Sophie. I think for me, COP Squared, when I first heard about the idea of a network of civil society, researchers, academics, everyone coming together because they are passionate about mental health, but at the same time, climate action, I thought this is really important. This is necessary. This has been missing for such a long time. For us at COP Squared, we're thinking of, can we rethink the idea of resilience to include human resilience, psychological resilience? Can we think of people, think of climate action beyond infrastructure, beyond tools, beyond theories, and really connect with people on a much deeper level, really connect with their mental health, their minds, connect with them on the emotions, things they believe in. So we're thinking of talking with interfaith leaders, community leaders, civil society that work with communities on the ground. Is localizing climate action, but really going deep into the roots for what matters, our minds, our emotions. That's what rules the world at the end of the day. How do people feel about actions? How do people feel about solutions and technologies that are being brought to them? How do people come together, connect? Obviously, it's beyond thinking of treating mental health. It's saying climate emotions are essential. Even if we're grieving, even if we're sad and anxious, we need to come together, create space, and work together, moving together in solidarity. That has been the idea for COP Squared. Taking ideas from the global south, from the global north, and coming together to rethink solidarity. That's how we work together. We haven't done that so well in the past, and we want to do that, working with the UN high-level climate champions, working through Billion Minds Institute, which is where COP Squared is, secretariat is at, to rethink and build a framework for resilience that includes human resilience.
Thank you, Jennifer. And really seeing it as an investable solution.
Absolutely,
in fact.
absolutely.
And we are very much looking to engage with financial institutions who are increasingly recognizing the importance of adaptation to see how emotional resilience can really be something to invest in. And Elise, I think it'd be interesting to turn to you. You've been relentlessly working for the past few years on bringing gender lens as an integral part of the solution to climate, for solutions that are sustainable, inclusive, amongst many other things. Maybe you could share some of your experience of how, and I think you should also say what success we collectively, or you starting to have on behalf of the collective by bringing gender. But I think some learnings of how because there's a big policy ask, right, that comes with the COP Square initiative. So some insights and learning that you can share with us.
Thank you so much, Sophie, and also answering to your previous question. Yes, we must invest in human beings. We tend to forget, we invest in infrastructures and technology, but in the end, what makes a successful country or successful organizations is human beings. And I love what you say, sister, I forgot your name, the fact that, we need to bridge the gap also, to go beyond this north-south divide. Because in the end, we were all born on planet Earth. We will all die on planet Earth. And the climate emergency now, the clock is ticking. We have 2 or 3 years left. So we need to work as one team for one planet. In what we call in our organization, it's our DNA, radical collaboration. So that means going beyond our egos, our logos, our institutional boundaries. And now we're talking about She Changes Climate. We launched this initiative already last year at COP26, to ask for 50% of women on the presidency team at the very top. We think that this is very strategic because it's the tip of the iceberg. And we are now advocating for co-chairs. So for UAE next year for COP28, we are asking for the UAE to appoint Minister Maria Almeri, the Minister of Climate and Environment, to be co-president. And if not, because we know there is a lot of pressure to get the Minister of Energy as co-president, to have them as co-chairs. And we think this is the future, a man and a woman co-leading the most important climate summit for humanity. Thank you. And this is also because we're complementary, and we want to bring the men on board with us on this journey. We have to navigate this space together. We all also have this both feminine and masculine energy, and the men also have feminine and masculine energy. So you can't sail the world with one eye patched up, right? We need to be together because we have complementary vision, a 360 vision. So this is what we're asking now, and I don't know if it's going to work, but at least we know the high-level climate champion is going to be a woman. Maybe you know her, the president of IUCN. And it's also about going beyond the gender divide, really working together as one big family.
Yeah, and it's on this idea of, sort of bringing a whole self to the deployment of solutions with our emotions, with our understanding of the crises, with all representation included. So, Jennifer, if I go back to you specifically on COP Squared, it was launched 2 days ago as part of the Race to Resilience. Can you tell us a little bit more about the ambition for the next year also, and also the ways in which this approach is very regionally based, is recognizing that while we all have in common the need to tap into that emotional resilience, our approach might be different region by region. If you can talk a little bit about the process.
Absolutely, and just to say, I'm a big part and a big fan of She Leads Climate, signing signatures and all of that.
She changes climate.
She changes climate. Yeah, so in terms of COP Squared and our ambition, everything has happened really, really interesting. The passion and interest coming from a lot of organizations saying, this is crucial, this is important. For us in the next 1 year, it's developing the framework for Race to Resilience, positioning COP Squared as that cross-cutting enabler for all of the 6 major themes that the UNFCCC is working on for adaptation, moving on from now. So it's a very kind of brilliant way of bringing together everyone, but also locally having regional hubs. So at the moment, every region has a hub. In sub-Saharan Africa, there's a focal point. There are people who you can have conversations with on what's next. How can we, build this idea of mental resilience? And what does it look like in your local context? So some of the things that we're learning is that mental health means different things for different people. For some people, pushing them out of poverty, supporting them, listening to them, creating ways to, like I said earlier, not just treat, but enabling connections. Sometimes people just need to be heard. They need to be heard. They need space where their feelings are validated. And those are some of the ways that COP Squared is looking to employ indigenous knowledge. So it's not just the Western way of doing, coping through struggles, but it's looking at what have our ancestors done in the past? What can we learn from that? How can we work with researchers, academics, and in particular, policymakers, in cities, in urban areas, and both rural areas? How can we work together to think of a new framework that really drives the idea of race to resilience?
And Jennifer, can you provide examples of what the kind of policies? I know we are collectively at the beginning of this work, but the kind of policy that you might put, ask that you have, and maybe we take an example of in your context.
Well, absolutely. So some of the thoughts, conversations coming up is partnerships with governments, looking at health systems within government, climate systems within government, and bringing everyone together in the table. So to have a really robust resilience framework where people no longer work in silos. Health systems, recognize the urgency and priority. So the health systems aren't talking about climate change as something that is aside. It's a priority for them. Same with climate systems, climate action departments in different cities. So it's bringing everyone on the table to say, this is where everyone has a role to play. This is our priority, to really advance climate adaptation, but in a way that centers people as agents of change. So that is the big picture.
Thank you, Jennifer. And if we continue along this idea of mental resilience, emotional resilience being an investable solutions, what is, and it's addressed to both of you, what do you think is needed for the private sector to really understand the business case for that? I wish we had a finance person here on this panel, but next one we will. Any thoughts on how to make the case for that? And it could be by showing the risk of not doing so, and there are some really interesting examples, obviously, with the increased frequency of extreme weather events. If population cannot rebuild the emotional resilience, they simply won't be able to build that adaptability. But your thoughts on how to engage the private sector?
Yeah, I'm actually thinking beyond this issue of adaptation in the developing world. Let's talk about the finance industry, actually, because that's where the money is. They are starting to invest in human health in their companies because there are so many people who went through burnt out in the finance industry. And so I think there is now this awareness that even in the private sector, they have to walk the talk. And I think this issue of mental health was maybe a taboo before COVID. But now it's really something that everybody's talking about. And it's actually not just a question of North and South or adaptation. It's really about well-being. And for me, there's also a philosophical question because we are so much focusing on GDP growth and we are, extracting natural resources from the planet and we are also spoiling human beings. I mean, the financial system is just putting so much pressure on human beings that they last 1 year and then they change. So how do we make human well-being the center of our economic system? And there are countries like New Zealand, Jacinda Ardern, who has adopted a well-being budget. She's been investing a lot of money into health education for children, into climate action, and that's really the future. And I think some CEOs of big companies are starting to understand that because they are also seeing the impact of stress on their own teams inside the company.
Thank you, Liz. Jennifer, do you have any thoughts on that? And maybe, again, taking your example in Nigeria?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like there would not be 100% climate adaptation plan that's been invested in that does not incorporate, human psychological well-being and just our health in general. So the climate crisis is a health crisis, and looking at it from the point of view where you can't say you have completely supported with climate adaptation when you don't look at the loss and damage that impacts people. Some of these losses are non-economic. Some of these losses impact their mental health, impact their livelihood. There's loss of culture, loss of identity, and that's where investments and forms of compensation to support people's resilience, help them cope, help them have reasons to wake up every day and think of a better future. How do we imagine a better future or climate adaptation if we don't invest in supporting these people? So it goes in two ways. It goes in training ourselves, building knowledge as activists, actors, people who are working in the climate adaptation space, and then investing in projects, programs, research that can really support people. And you do this by working with the people. You do this by going into the communities. So you need funding to do that. You need to research the best ways to work with people, to co-design a way to build them, build their psychological resilience. And that's why we need the money.
Thank you, Jennifer. That was so powerful. Again, for those of you who just arrived, it's that shift of mindset from being a problem to solve to be an integral part of the solution. I think is so powerful. Elise.
No, I just wanted to add something also linked to She Changes Climate, because what's also important in particular in Africa, but other countries that are being impacted by climate disasters, resilience is also the capacity to cope with an emergency and how you emerge from this emergency to turn a disaster into a positive situation. And I think we also need to remember that about 80% of climate refugees are women. So they are being more impacted. But how do we shift from this narrative of victims to change makers? How do we make sure women are really making a change, a positive change in their lives? And something I've seen actually last night, I was with Minister Yasmin Fouad and 20 ministers from Africa, all women, amazing. And they told me stories about Kenya and Egypt in particular. When they had the COVID crisis, they've set up this very innovative finance mechanism where women are working together in a group of 8 women, and they help each other by investing in each other, actually. So it's a kind of micro-credit scheme, but it's all based on trust. And in Kenya, they started this program called Joy for Women like 12 years ago, but it's been really booming during the COVID crisis. And I think this solidarity between women is really something where we should invest, because it's also what is the basis for human health and for resilience, for women in the developing world. And I think the She Changes Climate network, in a way, is also an example that when you have women helping each other, you can create miracles.
And Elise, it's not by accident that I've invited you today, because I think the She Changes Climate movement can be a great force to support that. So I just would like to open the floor for questions. We have 10 minutes for questions and comments, either on the idea itself or COP Square as an initiative, if anyone would like. Raise your hands. Please at the back there. If you can say your name and ask a question.
Yeah, thank you so much. My name is Stephen Bright Sakwa, and I come from Uganda. Some time back, I worked with refugees, and it was about climate-smart agriculture. So we went in with an idea of constructing a water source that would enable them to have water during the dry seasons, to do irrigation so that they can produce their own food. Because during the COVID-19 pandemic, the food supplies which they depend on from development partners reduced. As we know, COVID-19 affected all value chains. But what happened is that when the dry season started, the water source we constructed was also not reliable. It kept drying up, so they were not able to have this water for irrigation. So we had invested a lot in training them about adapting, using climate-smart agriculture techniques. But then this happens. You can see how that can be heart-wrenching. I just want to ask our panelists, me as the project implementer, how am I supposed to encourage these people to have the courage to continue despite the disappointments? Thank you.
Thank you. If you hold that question, I'll take another question maybe to have a few more. Please at the front there, and then the gentleman there, the lady.
Hello, my name is Bane. I run an initiative called Mothers of the Amazon. I loved what you said about women coming together can create miracles. I'm just wondering if you could share some of the models on emotional resilience, or like tips on how do we build emotional resilience in the youth. You mentioned supporting the youth.
Thank you. And we have Charlie that was here before. So Charlie, I'd love to hear your thoughts as well. But please, a question for the gentleman at the front.
Again, on agriculture, there are arguably simple agricultural techniques that could improve soil carbon. Soil carbon is related to water retention. It improves water penetration, so the water you get actually ends up in your land rather than running off. There's farmers called the Haggertys in Australia, 11 inches of rain, light sandy soils, using compost tea extract as a seed treatment, a drip feed, and a foliar spray. They're getting equivalent yields, no NPK, and minimum agrochemicals. And other people around the world are also seeing these results. But how does one get a system where we can put in maybe video form with an access to go to an information forum through a female network for education of farmers into historically developed techniques? So Sir Albert Howard in India, who was appointed the imperial botanist, but working very much for small farmers, developed composting techniques. They saw huge increases in yields, water resiliency, and yet there seems to be no way to enable these techniques to be brought to small farmers.
Thank you. I'm not fully getting the link to human and emotion resilience in your question.
Well, I'm so sorry, but if you have food, you have crops that are more resilient, you can feed your children, you have...
Yes, okay, thank you, thank you. So maybe one more at the back, whoops, and then, so there is, yeah.
Oh, is it coming on? Perfect. Hi, thank you so much. My name is Chloe. I'm with the delegation from Northwestern University out of the United States. I'm curious, throughout the conference, a huge theme has been the global north and the global south being able to come together in cooperation and collaboration. From an emotional side, I feel like those from the global north might come to those partnerships initially with some guilt or some shame, and those from the global south might come with some rightful mistrust. Do you have any pointers on how we can approach those initial engagements to build trust and collaboration?
That's a great question. So let me summarize. there is how do we manage to find resilience in a context that can be quite desperate? Some tricks and techniques that you might recommend, and how do we acknowledge and reconcile approaches or mindset that can be very different to how we conceive emotional resilience? Jennifer, do you want to have a go?
Those are very big questions. And I wish I had all of the answers, because this is a journey that we're still learning. There's still a lot of research that needs to come in, and that's why we're asking for the investments, to come in. And, I put that question to the gentleman from Uganda. When projects fail, how handling disappointment, it can be very difficult, I would say. And that's why sometimes projects or funding, to support adaptation or support people need to be robust enough to buffer, some of these issues that come up, so that people can immediately get a plan B. That always doesn't happen. When people start up things, it's literally their entire livelihoods depend on it. We see that happening, for example, in Nigeria. The data is saying 1.2 million people have been impacted by the recent floods. Their livelihoods, their farms, all underwater, and we'll see that impact coming up. But what insurance systems or social protection systems are available to support them? Oftentimes we don't have that, and we need to start to call for those kind of robust systems, to support people loss and damage when things like this happen, where it's just, climate mitigation funds can help, adaptation funds can help. Can people receive compensation so that at least they can, continue to push through? So that's part of what we're advocating at COP27. And then, to the question about tips, it's very difficult, and I think it's also contextual. From research, some of the things that we see is first naming, and acknowledging that there is indeed a problem, that we're experiencing something. So for the longest time, I've done this work with young people for 6-7 years. We never had a name to how we felt. We're just frustrated and stressed out. But before names like eco-anxiety, climate anxiety came up, we didn't know what we were dealing with. And you hear people say, oh, we've experienced this for such a long time. We've always dealt with it. But naming it gives, validates it. It makes us believe that we're not crazy after all. We're passionate about protecting the environment, but at the same time, these conversations are heavy and overwhelming. And I think space to reflect, space to go around the room and everyone talks about how they are feeling. I spent most part of 2020 talking with people in UK about eco-anxiety, and teachers talk about how every day they go into classrooms, teach students about climate change, but they don't even take time to reflect on how does this make me feel as a teacher, constantly pouring out these issues to young people. They feel like eco-anxiety, but the teachers as well do not have space to reflect. And then finally, action. Action has been one way to engage, coming together, not just as an individual, but together, through your network, for example, teachers coming together, taking action. And action can mean anything. Action can mean, going out to plant trees, going on a strike, even coming together and just working together, supporting people. I think with community action, we build courage. With community action, we have one, central vision, and we say we want to support each other. I'm always empowered by, the quote and the idea that the climate action, climate activism, everything that we're doing is a marathon and it's not a sprint. And we're all going to work together, and it will take a while, but we need to have that hope, working together, shoulder to shoulder.
Jennifer, if I just interrupt you, because Elise has to go, so I want to, and then I'll come back to you. But Elise, maybe some final reflections from you.
Thank you so much. I have to run back to the Blue Zone for a ministerial. We're just answering my dear friend Sakura Bright Stefan. I'm so happy that we could bring you here at COP, and he's also part of our mentoring program. I think your question is very important. How do you find the courage to keep going when you have these climate impacts and you feel the whole world is breaking down with the war and food crisis and energy crisis? And I think my answer to that is that, we have no choice. I mean, I also feel a responsibility towards my children, that I can't give up. I mean, every day I wake up, I see their eyes. I can't give up. We have to act for them. Everything we do today will have a positive impact for them. And I also try to remind myself that we should be grateful for everything we have. every day I wake up and I think every step on earth is a miracle. So if we are grateful for what we have, it will also give us courage to go to the next step. And the solidarity, I think, is also helping us. And I think, yes, working together is also giving courage. Just to the second question, on very practical tips, I'm going to share just one because I have to go very soon. At least for me, what works is now every day I wake up, I do 10 or 20 minutes of yoga and mindfulness meditation. It just helps to be grounded, to remember, this, where we come from again, this contact with the earth and your breathing. So that's just one very practical tip, but there are many other tips about personal resilience, including on also food and sleep and emotional well-being. Your question on agriculture and water, obviously the soils are very important because also actually the planetary health and healthy soils is very much linked to human health. The food we eat is healthy if we have healthy soils. So your point about also the role of farmers and their mental health. I mean, now there are also farmers we heard in India who commit suicide because they are hopeless. So we also need to invest in the mental health of farmers in developing countries, super important. And then the last question, US. So yes, this thing about north-south and, okay, what is the US doing? Something I learned from Ambassador Khan when she had the presidency for COP23 for Fiji. She's an amazing leader. I don't know if you know her. She was leading with empathy and listening a lot to people. Something I learned from her is the naming and shaming is not going to help us in the climate negotiations. We need to go beyond that. And I think that also what I learned from her when she was leading the Talanoa dialogue, maybe you heard, is that inclusion and diversity are absolutely essential to make this process successful, but also to make our society healthy. Because when you have a diverse ecosystem, we know for biodiversity we need diverse species, etc. But for society it's the same. We need diverse human beings, diverse perspectives, diverse nationalities. And I really think that's a very important key to make COP27 a success, inclusion and diversity. So thank you so much, and
Thank
sorry
you,
I have
Elise.
to go.
No,
Thanks,
go
Sophie.
and keep the good work wherever you go next. And we will conclude with Jennifer. But please join me in thanking Elise for her contribution. And I'm just going to give Jennifer the final word because we are going to have to close. But Jennifer, I thought there was an excellent question there about how do we acknowledge the different vantage point that people are coming to this reflection on emotional resilience.
Well, that's such an interesting conversation, and it comes up a lot. Being a young black woman from Africa, interested in these issues, I recognize that my counterparts in the global north come with a lot of shame and guilt, while I come with anger and just powerlessness. And I'm always, consoled by this poem, and I'm just going to read it out as a way for us to close. It's by Lila Watson, and she says, "If you have come here to help me, you're wasting your time. But if you have come here because your liberation is bound up with mine, then let us walk together." I think thinking about it in that way, that we're all in the crisis together, but in different boats, and it's impacting us together in one way. So we move away from shame and guilt and think about how can we really work together? How can we move in true, genuine solidarity where the global north doesn't feel like they're helping, and I don't feel like I'm a victim, but we're all working together as co-creators and co-actors. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you for asking that question. And Jennifer, thank you for your beautiful answer. So maybe just final ask. Before you came here, did you ever consider emotional resilience to be integral to climate solutions? Raise your arm if you thought so. Be honest, okay? Okay. Now that you've heard this panel, do you think that emotional resilience is integral to climate solution? Thank you. That was the right answer. Thank you very much. I would have loved to hear from you, Charlie, but we hope we come back here tomorrow, right, for a longer session. Right. Jennifer reminded me a very important thing. Just take your phone, scan the QR code here so that you can sign up to COP Square and follow what's happening with this very important initiative that needs support and finance. Thank you very much for your attention.